My phone rang at 6:17 a.m. Nobody calls that early unless something is wrong. I rolled over, half asleep, and checked the screen. Dad. For a second, I smiled. Maybe he was finally calling just to talk. Maybe he wanted to know how I was doing. Maybe he missed me. I answered. Hey, Dad! There was no greeting. No good morning. No how are you? Just silence. Then his voice. How much money do you have? I sat up in bed. What? How much money do you have in your account? No explanation. No reason. Just the question. I stared at the wall. The same wall I stared at every morning before driving to work. The apartment was small. The furniture was old. I worked 60 hours a week to afford it. But somehow everyone in my family thought I was rich. Because I had a stable job. Because I paid my bills. Because I never complained. Dad, why are you asking? He sighed. The kind of sigh that made it sound like I was the problem. Your sister needs help. Of course, my sister, again. I loved Emily. But every emergency in her life somehow became my responsibility. Her rent, her car, her credit cards, her bad decisions. Every time. And every time the family looked at me, not because I was the oldest, because I was the one with money. I already helped her last month. That's different. How? It just is. I rubbed my forehead. Dad, I can't keep doing this. The silence that followed felt dangerous. Then he laughed. Not a happy laugh. A cold one? That's funny? What is? You acting like you're struggling. My jaw tightened. Because he had no idea. No idea how many nights I skipped dinner. No idea how many overtime shifts I worked. No idea how exhausted I was. He only saw the paycheck. Nothing else. Then he said the sentence that changed everything. You know what your problem is? I didn't answer. You forgot what family is. I almost laughed. Family? Was family supposed to be a one-way transaction? Was family supposed to call only when they needed money? Was family supposed to disappear when you needed help? I wanted to ask. But I already knew the answer. In their eyes, family meant one thing. Me paying, everyone else receiving. Then Dad's voice got sharper. Your sister needs $5,000. I nearly dropped the phone. 5,000? Yes. For what? That's not important. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. $5,000. And I wasn't even allowed to ask why. The anger building inside me wasn't really about the money. It was about the expectation, the assumption, the certainty that I would say yes, because that's what I always did. But something felt different that morning. For the first time in my life, I was tired of being the family's wallet, and when I finally told Dad what I was thinking, everything exploded. I thought saying no would start an argument. I had no idea it would make my entire family abandon me. I didn't answer Dad right away. My hand tightened around the phone. $5,000. The number echoed in my head. Not because I didn't have it, because I knew exactly what would happen if I gave it to them. The money would disappear. Nothing would change. And a few months later, they'd be back asking for more, just like always. Dad, I said carefully, where is this money actually going? A long silence filled the line. Then he spoke. Why does that matter? I almost laughed. Why did it matter? Because it was my money. Because nobody ever explained anything. Because every time there was a crisis, I was expected to fix it without asking questions. Because I'm the one paying for it. His voice instantly hardened. Family shouldn't keep score. That sentence, I had heard it my entire life. Family shouldn't keep score. Funny how people only said that when they owed you something. Never when they were helping you. I closed my eyes. And suddenly years of memories came rushing back. The first time had been when I was 23. Emily had crashed her car. Dad called me in tears. Your sister needs help. I emptied most of my savings to help her buy another car. She promised she'd pay me back. She never did. Then came the credit card debt, $8,000. Just this once. That's what everyone said. Just this once. But just this once somehow happened every year. Then there was the apartment deposit, the medical bill, the broken transmission, the vacation she couldn't afford but somehow took anyway. Every emergency had one solution. Me, the family problem solver, the family bank account, the family ATM. And the worst part? Nobody even seemed grateful anymore. It had become normal, expected, like breathing, like sunrise, like taxes. I wasn't a son. I wasn't a brother. I was a resource. A walking paycheck, a backup plan. Dad's voice pulled me back to reality. So are you sending the money or not? No concern, no conversation. Straight to the point. The transaction. I looked around my apartment. The couch had a tear in the armrest. My refrigerator made strange noises. My car had over 200,000 miles on it. Meanwhile, Emily somehow always had the newest phone, the newest clothes, weekend trips, concert tickets, expensive dinners, and somehow she was always broke. I worked overtime. She posted vacation photos, yet I was the selfish one. The math never made sense. Dad, what happened to the money I sent last month? Another silence. Then a sigh. That isn't important right now. There it was again. The question nobody wanted answered. I stood up and walked to the kitchen. Rain tapped against the apartment window. The sky outside was gray, the same color I felt inside. For years, I had convinced myself I was helping family. For years, I told myself it was the right thing to do. But standing there, listening to Dad avoid every question, a terrible thought crossed my mind. What if they never saw me as family? What if they only saw what I could provide? The thought hurt, because deep down, I already knew the answer. Then another memory surfaced, a memory I had tried to forget. 3 years earlier, I had lost my job, only for 6 weeks, but it had been terrifying. For the first time in my life, I needed help. Real help! I remembered calling Dad. I remembered the embarrassment, the shame, the fear. Dad, things are tight right now. His answer had been immediate. You'll figure it out. That's it. No money, no support, no emergency family meeting, no speeches about helping each other. Just, you'll figure it out. And I had. I drained my savings, worked temporary jobs, sold things I owned, survived on cheap instant noodles, and somehow nobody came running to save me. Yet every time Emily had a problem, the entire family acted like the world was ending. The realization hit me harder than ever. The rules were different for me. Always had been. I wasn't allowed to need help. I was only allowed to give it. Dad, what? I'm not sending $5,000. The silence that followed felt endless. Then I heard him exhale slowly. Not surprised, not disappointed, angry. You've changed. There it was. The accusation. The moment every people-pleaser eventually faces. The second they stop giving, they're suddenly the villain. Maybe I had changed, or maybe I had finally started seeing the truth. You know what? Dad snapped. Your sister was right about you. My stomach dropped. What does that mean? Another pause. Then the words came. Cold, sharp, designed to hurt. She said you think you're better than the rest of us. I stared out the rain-covered window. Because for the first time, I realized this wasn't really about money. It was about control. And the second I stopped saying yes, everything was about to fall apart. That night, I received a message from my sister. And what she wrote proved that my family had been talking about me behind my back for years. For the rest of the day, I couldn't focus. Dad's words kept replaying in my head. Your sister was right about you. Every time I heard that sentence in my mind, it felt worse. Not because it hurt. Because it made me wonder what else had been said when I wasn't around. What conversations had happened behind closed doors? What stories had they told about me? By the time I got home from work, I had almost convinced myself to let it go. Then my phone buzzed. A text message from Emily. I stared at her name on the screen. Part of me didn't even want to open it, but I did. The message was short. I can't believe you're doing this to the family. I blinked. Doing what? Keeping my own money? Not funding another crisis? Before I could respond, another message appeared. Dad told me everything. Of course he did. And somehow I already knew how the story had been told. Not as a brother setting boundaries, not as someone asking reasonable questions, but as the selfish villain who refused to help. I typed back. Then Dad should have also told you I've already helped you for years. The typing bubble appeared almost immediately, then disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, her reply came. Nobody forced you. I laughed. Actually laughed, not because it was funny, because it was unbelievable. Nobody forced me. Technically, she was right. Nobody held a gun to my head. Nobody legally required me to help. But emotional pressure, guilt, family expectations, those had been there every single time. Another text arrived. Family helps family. The same line. The same script, The same excuse. Always. I put my phone down and walked to the kitchen. I needed a minute. A long minute, because something about this conversation felt different. For years, I had accepted every explanation, every emergency, every promise, every excuse. But now I wanted answers, real answers. And for the first time, I decided to do something I had never done before. I started looking. Not spying, not stalking, just paying attention. Over the next few days, pieces started falling into place. And the picture they created wasn't pretty. Emily wasn't struggling because life had been unfair. She was struggling because she made terrible financial decisions, over and over again. The newest phone every year, designer clothes, luxury beauty treatments, weekend trips, expensive restaurants, online shopping deliveries arriving almost daily. Yet somehow she always claimed she couldn't pay basic bills. At first I thought maybe I was being judgmental. Maybe I didn't know the full story. Then something happened. A mutual friend called me, completely by accident. We were catching up when Emily's name came up, and without realizing it, he said something that stopped me cold. That Vegas trip looked insane. I frowned. Vegas trip? Yeah, last month. Last month. The same month Emily told everyone she couldn't pay rent. The same month I had sent money. The same month Dad claimed she was desperate. I felt a knot form in my stomach. Vegas? There was an awkward pause. The kind of pause people make when they realize they've said too much. You didn't know? No, I didn't know. Because nobody ever told me where the money went. The call ended a few minutes later. But my mind wouldn't stop racing. That night, I checked social media. I hadn't looked at Emily's pages in months. And there it was. Pictures, videos, hotels, restaurants, nightclubs, smiles, luxury shopping bags, a vacation that looked anything but cheap. My chest tightened, not because she went on vacation, because weeks later she was asking me for money. Again. And suddenly every piece of the puzzle started fitting together. The emergencies, the missing money, the endless requests, the vague explanations. For years I had been funding a lifestyle I knew nothing about, and nobody thought I deserved the truth. The realization hurt more than I expected, because it wasn't just Emily. Dad knew. Mom knew. Everyone knew. Yet somehow I was always the last person informed, the one expected to pay without asking questions, the one expected to trust, the one expected to stay quiet. That night I barely slept, and the next morning I woke up to something even worse. A group message, family chat, 7 people, aunts, uncles, cousins, Mom, Dad, Emily, every single person in the family. And right there in front of everyone, Dad had posted a message about me, not privately, publicly, for the entire family to see. The moment I read it, my stomach dropped, because suddenly I understood something terrifying. This wasn't a disagreement anymore. My family wasn't trying to change my mind. They were preparing to turn everyone against me. When I opened the family group chat, I discovered Dad had told a lie so big that half the family already hated me before I could defend myself. I stared at my phone screen. The family group chat had over 40 unread messages. 40 in less than 12 hours. My stomach tightened. Something told me this wasn't going to be good. Slowly, I opened the conversation. The first message was from Dad, and the second I read it, my jaw clenched. I'm disappointed in my son. We've always taught our children to help family, but money has changed him. I read it twice, then 3 times. Not because I misunderstood it. Because I couldn't believe it. Money changed me? I wasn't the one asking for $5,000. I wasn't the one demanding help. I wasn't the one spending money I didn't have. Yet somehow I was the problem. I kept scrolling, and it only got worse. An aunt wrote, "That's heartbreaking." An uncle replied, "Family should come first." A cousin added, "Success really changes people." Success? I almost laughed. If they saw my apartment, they wouldn't call me successful. If they saw my bank account after years of helping everyone else, they definitely wouldn't call me rich. But nobody had asked for my side. Nobody. They had heard Dad's version and accepted it immediately. Then I saw Emily's message. I never thought my own brother would abandon me during my hardest time. Abandon. The word hit me like a punch, because it was a lie, a complete lie. How do you abandon someone you've spent years helping? How do you abandon someone after paying for their car, bills, rent, and emergencies? The answer was simple. You don't. But facts didn't matter anymore. The narrative had already been written, and I was the villain. I kept reading. Every message felt worse than the last. People weren't discussing what happened. They were discussing who I had become. Selfish, cold, greedy, ungrateful. The labels kept coming, and none of them were true. Then my mother finally spoke. I had been hoping she'd defend me, at least ask questions, at least stay neutral. Instead, she wrote, "Families should stay together during difficult times." That was it. No support, no fairness, no attempt to understand. Just another subtle reminder that I was expected to give in. My chest felt heavy, because for the first time I realized something painful. This wasn't about right or wrong. It wasn't about facts. It wasn't even about money. The family had already chosen sides, and I wasn't on theirs. Then my phone rang. Dad, again. I considered ignoring it, but I answered. "Hello." His voice came through immediately. "Did you read the messages?" "Yeah." "Good." "Good?" Like this was some kind of lesson, some kind of punishment? I stayed silent. Then he said something that shocked me. "You still have time to fix this." Fix this, meaning send the money, meaning surrender, meaning admit I was wrong for saying no. I looked out the window of my apartment. Cars moved through the evening traffic below. People living their lives. Meanwhile, my own family was treating me like an enemy. "Dad," I said quietly, "why didn't you tell them the whole story?" Silence. Then a short laugh. "What whole story?" "The years I helped Emily." More silence. Then came the answer. The answer that changed everything. "That doesn't matter right now." I felt something inside me snap. Not anger, not sadness, clarity. For years I thought the problem was money. But money wasn't the problem. The problem was that nobody valued what I gave. The moment I stopped giving, my value disappeared. I wasn't family. I was useful. And now I wasn't being useful. So they were replacing gratitude with guilt. I took a deep breath. "Dad, tell everyone exactly how much I've helped Emily." His response was immediate. "No." I blinked. "No?" "No." Why? Because he knew. He knew the number would destroy the story. He knew people would start asking questions. He knew the truth would ruin the narrative. Then he said the words I will never forget. "Nobody asked you to keep track." I almost dropped the phone. Nobody asked me to keep track. Years of savings, years of sacrifices, years of support. And apparently none of it counted. None of it mattered. Because according to Dad, the moment you help family, you're supposed to forget it ever happened. Unless they need more. Then suddenly they remember exactly who to call. The conversation ended shortly after that. Neither of us had anything left to say. But the nightmare wasn't over. Because later that evening, another notification appeared. This time it wasn't from Dad, or Emily, or the family group chat. It was from my cousin Jake. The cousin I trusted most. The message was only one sentence long, but it made my blood run cold. "You need to see what they're saying about you when you're not around." And attached to the message were screenshots, dozens of them. The screenshots revealed private family conversations that were never supposed to reach me. And what they said behind my back was worse than I ever imagined. My hands froze. I stared at Jake's message, then at the screenshots attached below it. For a moment, I didn't open them. Part of me didn't want to know. Because once you learn what people really think about you, you can't unlearn it. You can't put it back. Eventually, I tapped the first screenshot and instantly wished I hadn't. It was another family group chat, a private one I wasn't part of. The title made my stomach sink. Family only. Family only, meaning everyone except me. I stared at the screen. A strange feeling settled over me. Not anger, not even sadness, just confirmation. Confirmation of something I had secretly suspected for years. I was included when money was needed, excluded when it wasn't. Slowly, I started reading. The messages stretched back months, maybe years, and every new screenshot felt worse than the last. One aunt wrote, "He acts like helping his sister is some huge sacrifice." Another replied, "He's always been dramatic." Dramatic. The word almost made me laugh. Nobody called me dramatic when I was writing checks. Nobody called me dramatic when I was paying bills. Nobody called me dramatic when I was solving emergencies. Funny how those labels appeared the second I said no. I kept scrolling. Then I found Emily. My heart sank. Because what she wrote hurt more than everything else combined. "Honestly, if he cared about family, he wouldn't make us beg." Beg? I stared at the message, trying to process it, trying to understand how reality had become so twisted. Nobody had begged. They demanded, expected, assumed. But somehow I was the villain for hesitating. Then I reached a message from Dad, and that's when everything changed. His words were short, only one sentence, but they hit harder than anything else. He'll give in eventually, he always does. I stopped breathing for a second. Then I read it again, and again, and again, because suddenly every piece of the puzzle clicked into place. This wasn't an emergency. This wasn't desperation. This wasn't family seeking help. This was strategy. They weren't discussing whether I would help. They were discussing how long it would take before I surrendered. Like I always had. Like I always did. Because in their minds, I wasn't a person. I was predictable. A machine. Push the guilt button. Wait long enough. Collect the money. Repeat. My chest felt hollow. For years, I believed my generosity brought us closer. But these messages revealed the truth. They never respected my help. They expected it. There is a huge difference. One earns gratitude. The other creates entitlement. And entitlement was everywhere. The deeper I read, the worse it became. One cousin joked that I was the emergency fund. Another called me the family sponsor. Several people laughed. Actually laughed. At me. At the person helping them. I put my phone down. I couldn't read anymore. The apartment was silent. Too silent. Outside, the city lights flickered through the window. Inside, something was breaking. Not my heart. My illusion. The illusion that I belonged. Because belonging shouldn't require payments. Love shouldn't come with invoices. Family shouldn't feel like a subscription service. Yet somehow mine did. A few minutes later, Jake called. I answered immediately. Why are you showing me this? He hesitated, then sighed. Because you deserve the truth. I sat down, exhausted. What changed? His voice became quieter. Guilt. I frowned. What do you mean? Everyone talks about how much you've changed. And nobody talks about everything you've done. That hurt because it was true, Jake continued. They act like you've never helped anyone. I looked at the screenshots again. He was right. Years of sacrifices had been erased. One refusal had rewritten my entire history. Then Jake said something that made my stomach twist. You know they're planning a family dinner, right? I sat upright. What? Another pause. They want everyone there. A bad feeling washed over me. What for? Jake hesitated again, then answered. To pressure you into giving the money. I closed my eyes. Of course, a public intervention, an ambush disguised as a family gathering. They weren't trying to understand me. They were trying to break me. Because if guilt didn't work over the phone, maybe a room full of disappointed faces would. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then Jake said one final thing. They're counting on the old version of you showing up. The old version. The version who apologized for having boundaries. The version who felt guilty for keeping his own money. The version who always surrendered. Maybe he was right. Maybe that's exactly who they expected. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't sure that version existed anymore. And when Saturday arrived, the entire family was about to find out. At the family dinner, I expected criticism. But I never expected Dad to reveal a secret he'd hidden from me for more than 20 years. Saturday arrived faster than I expected. All week, I thought about canceling. Every instinct told me not to go. I already knew what would happen. The lectures, the guilt trips, the disappointed looks, the pressure. But another part of me needed answers. Needed to see everyone face to face. Needed to know whether the people in those screenshots were the same people who smiled at me during holidays. So I went. The dinner was at my parents' house. The same house I had grown up in. The same driveway, the same front porch, the same memories. Yet somehow it felt completely different. As I stepped out of my car, I noticed something strange. Every vehicle was already there. Everyone had arrived early, almost like they were waiting for me, preparing. The feeling in my stomach got worse. I walked to the front door and knocked. Mom answered. For a brief second, I thought she might hug me. Instead, she simply stepped aside. Come in. No smile, no warmth, nothing. The living room was packed. Aunts, uncles, cousins, Emily, Dad, everyone. And the moment I entered, the room went quiet. The kind of quiet that only happens when people have been talking about you. I suddenly understood. This wasn't dinner. It was a trial. and I was the defendant. Dad stood first. Glad you came. I nodded. No one else said much. People avoided eye contact. Some looked uncomfortable. Others looked annoyed. A few looked angry. The atmosphere felt heavy, like everyone had already decided the outcome before hearing the evidence. We sat down around the dining table. Food covered every surface, but nobody seemed interested in eating. The conversation started politely enough. Weather, work, random small talk. Then Dad cleared his throat. And everything changed. We need to discuss Emily's situation. There it was. The real reason I had been invited. Several relatives immediately turned toward me. Waiting, watching, judging. Dad folded his hands. Your sister is going through a difficult time. I remained silent. He continued. Family members should support each other. Another silence. Then an aunt spoke. Especially when they're fortunate enough to help. Fortunate. Interesting choice of words. Nobody mentioned the overtime shifts. Nobody mentioned the sacrifices. Nobody mentioned the years of support. Just fortunate. Like money magically appeared in my account. I looked around the table. Every face seemed to be waiting for me to apologize, to surrender, to write the check. Just like always. But this time I had something they didn't expect. The truth. Dad, I said calmly, before we continue, I'd like to ask a question. His eyes narrowed slightly. What question? I looked directly at him. How much money have I given Emily over the years? The room instantly became quiet. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. Dad's expression hardened. That's not relevant. I almost smiled. Of course it was relevant. It was the most relevant thing in the room. If we're discussing family support, I replied, it seems pretty relevant. Several relatives shifted uncomfortably. For the first time all evening, they looked uncertain. Dad didn't answer. So I continued. I helped with the car, silence, the rent. Nobody interrupted. The apartment deposit. The room grew even quieter. The medical bills. Now people were looking at each other. Because many of them had never heard this list before. The narrative was starting to crack. And Dad knew it. Then Emily suddenly spoke. You didn't have to do any of that. I turned toward her. The same line again. The same excuse. You accepted every dollar. She opened her mouth, then closed it. No response, because there wasn't one. The truth was standing in the middle of the room now, and everyone could see it. For years I had helped. For years I had supported. For years I had shown up. Yet somehow one refusal had erased everything. Then something unexpected happened. My uncle spoke. One of Dad's older brothers, a man who rarely said anything. How much are we talking about? The question hung in the air. I answered honestly. Over the years, probably close to $50,000. Several people gasped. Someone dropped a fork. Emily stared at the table. And suddenly the room looked very different. Because $50,000 wasn't a favor. It wasn't a small loan. It wasn't pocket change. It was a life-changing amount of money. Dad immediately jumped in. That's not the point. But this time people weren't listening as closely. The spell was breaking. Questions were forming. Doubts were appearing. For the first time all evening, I felt the room shifting. Then Dad stood up, and what he said next shocked everyone, including me. You've always thought you're better than this family. I blinked. What? His voice rose, years of frustration pouring out. You always have. The room froze. Nobody expected this. Neither did I. Because suddenly this wasn't about Emily anymore. It wasn't about money. It was personal, very personal. And then Dad revealed something he'd apparently been carrying for decades, a secret resentment, a belief he'd never spoken out loud before. The moment he said it, everything finally made sense. Dad admitted he'd been angry with me since I was a teenager, and the real reason had nothing to do with money, Emily, or family. Nobody spoke. The entire dining room sat frozen. Dad was still standing, his face red, his hands clenched. For a moment, it looked like he was deciding whether to continue. Then he did, and every word hit harder than the last. You want to know the truth? The room remained silent. Dad laughed bitterly. I've been listening to this for years. Listening to what? I had no idea what he was talking about. Then he pointed directly at me. You've spent your whole life acting like you're different. I stared at him. Different? Because I had a job? Because I paid my bills? Because I saved money? I honestly didn't understand. But Dad wasn't finished. Ever since high school? The room got quieter somehow. You were always talking about college. I blinked. College? What did college have to do with any of this? Then he continued. You acted like you were too good for this town. A strange feeling washed over me. Not anger, confusion, because that wasn't what happened. Not even close. When I was 17, I wanted to go to college. That was true. But I never looked down on anyone. I never acted superior. I simply wanted opportunities, a future, a chance. Yet somehow Dad had spent years interpreting that as rejection. Then the memory came back. A conversation from decades ago, one I'd almost forgotten. I had received an acceptance letter. I was excited, terrified, hopeful. And when I showed Dad, his response wasn't what I'd expected. Instead of celebrating, he got quiet. Very quiet. At the time, I thought he was surprised. Now I wondered if it had been something else. Resentment. The realization hit me hard. All these years, had he been carrying that? Dad kept talking. You left. The word sounded almost accusing. You got your degree. Another accusation. You got a good job. Another one. You moved away. The pieces finally clicked together. This wasn't about success. It wasn't about money. It was about expectations. Dad had expected me to stay. Stay close. Stay the same. Stay dependent. But I hadn't. And somewhere along the way, my independence became an insult. Not because I intended it, because he interpreted it that way. The room was silent as everyone processed his words. Then Mom quietly spoke. Frank. Dad ignored her. His eyes never left me. You think you're smarter than everybody. I shook my head. No. Yes. No, Dad. The anger drained from my voice, because suddenly I wasn't angry anymore. I was sad. Sad that we'd spent years misunderstanding each other. Sad that so much resentment had been hidden beneath the surface. Sad that money had only exposed a wound that already existed. Then I asked the question that had been growing in my mind. If that's how you felt? I paused. Why didn't you ever tell me? Dad opened his mouth, then closed it. For the first time all night, he didn't have an answer. Because maybe there wasn't one. Maybe it was easier to be angry than vulnerable. Maybe it was easier to criticize than admit hurt. The silence stretched. Then something unexpected happened. My uncle, the same one who had asked about the money, spoke again. Frank. Dad looked at him. His brother's expression was serious. None of that explains why you've been asking him for money for years. The room shifted instantly. Back to reality. Back to the actual issue. Dad's face tightened. Because my uncle was right. Whatever resentment existed, it didn't explain the loans, the requests, the expectations, the pressure. And everyone knew it. Then another relative spoke. An aunt, quietly, carefully. How much money has Emily received from the rest of us? The question landed like a bomb. Nobody answered. Because everyone knew the truth. Very little. Most of it had come from me. The room grew uncomfortable. People started realizing something important. They had been judging me without knowing the full story. And now the full story was sitting right in front of them. Emily finally stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. Tears filled her eyes. For a moment, I felt bad. Then she spoke, and the sympathy disappeared. This is unbelievable. She looked around the room. You're all acting like I'm some kind of criminal. Nobody had said that. Not one person. But victims rarely see accountability clearly. Then she looked directly at me. I needed help. I nodded. And I helped. Her expression faltered. Because she knew it was true. Years of help. Years of support. Years of sacrifices. Facts she couldn't erase. Then she said something that changed everything. A sentence she probably didn't mean to say out loud. A sentence that exposed the truth. If you hadn't stopped helping, none of this would have happened. The room went silent. Again. Because everyone heard it. Everyone understood it. She didn't say, if you hadn't stopped loving us. She didn't say, if you hadn't stopped supporting family. She said, if you hadn't stopped helping. Meaning money. Nothing else. Just money. The mask finally slipped. And once people saw it, they couldn't unsee it. I looked around the table. The atmosphere had changed completely. People who had arrived angry now looked uncomfortable. People who had judged me now looked uncertain. People who had believed the story were starting to question it. Then Jake caught my eye from across the room. He gave the smallest nod, as if to say, "They finally see it." Maybe they did. Maybe not. But one thing was clear. The family meeting hadn't gone according to plan. Not even close. And just when I thought the night was finally ending, a loud knock echoed through the house. Everyone turned toward the front door. Nobody was expecting anyone. Dad frowned. Mom looked confused. Then another knock came, louder this time. And when Dad opened the door, the person standing outside changed everything. The stranger at the door carried information about Emily's finances that nobody in the family was prepared to hear. The room went completely still. Even the air felt heavier. Dad slowly walked toward the front door, one step at a time, like he already knew whatever was waiting outside wasn't going to be good news. He opened it. A man stood there, late 30s, business casual, holding a folder. Not a friend, not family, someone professional. "Mr. Harris?" the man asked. Dad nodded slowly. "Can I come in? This is regarding Emily." The moment he said her name, I saw Emily's face change. Confusion first, then something closer to fear. Dad stepped aside. The man walked in and looked around the room. He noticed everyone, paused slightly, then spoke. "I'm sorry to interrupt your gathering. My name is Daniel. I'm a financial advisor from the bank Emily has been dealing with." Bank. That word hit differently. Emily suddenly spoke up. "What is this about?" Daniel looked at her directly. "It's about your outstanding balances." Silence dropped instantly. Not uncomfortable silence. Dangerous silence. Dad frowned. "What balances?" Daniel opened the folder. "I'll be direct. There are overdue payments across multiple accounts, credit cards, personal loans, and one defaulted store financing agreement." My stomach tightened. But I already knew. Somewhere deep down, I already knew. Emily tried to laugh it off. "There must be some mistake." Daniel didn't react. He just kept reading. "No mistake. Total outstanding debt is approximately..." He paused, looked up, then said it. $68,000. The number didn't just land. It crashed. Someone actually whispered, "What?" Mom covered her mouth. Dad stepped forward. "That can't be right." Daniel nodded calmly. "It is, and this has been accumulating for years. Years, not months, years." My mind went back instantly. Every emergency, every request, every time I sent money, and every time I was told it was temporary. But nothing had been temporary. It had been building, silently, behind the scenes, like a storm no one wanted to acknowledge. Emily's voice cracked. "You don't understand." Daniel interrupted gently but firmly. "I do understand. I've seen the spending history." He turned a page in the folder. Multiple luxury purchases, travel bookings, high-end retail transactions, restaurant spending far above income level. Each sentence felt like another layer being peeled away, publicly. In front of everyone, Dad turned slowly toward Emily, his voice low. "Is this true?" Emily hesitated. That hesitation said everything. The room shifted again, this time not toward me, but away from her. Daniel continued. "There is also one more issue." He looked at me briefly, then back to the room. A significant portion of repayments over the past few years were made through irregular transfers from a third party. Everyone slowly turned toward me. I felt it before he even finished the sentence. Daniel confirmed it anyway. "From your brother." My throat tightened. Because now it was official. Not assumption, not family gossip. Documentation, proof. Dad's face went pale. Mom looked like she couldn't breathe properly. Emily shook her head quickly. No, that's not..." Daniel raised a hand. "I'm not here to assign blame. I'm here to clarify the situation. The accounts are now at risk of legal action if not addressed." Legal action. That changed the room completely. Because now this wasn't family drama. This was financial reality. Serious consequences. Real consequences. Dad turned to me slowly. For the first time that night, his voice wasn't angry. It was uncertain. "How long has this been going on?" I swallowed. "Years." Just one word. But it said everything. Years of me carrying this. Years of them not asking questions. Years of silence. Emily suddenly broke down. "I didn't know it got this bad." But Daniel didn't react to emotion. He dealt in facts. It has been this bad for a while. He closed the folder slightly. And based on current projections, without intervention, bankruptcy is likely within months. The word hung in the air. Bankruptcy. Mom sat down slowly, like her legs couldn't support her anymore. The dinner table that had started as an interrogation had turned into something else entirely. A collapse. A full exposure of everything that had been hidden. Dad finally spoke again, his voice quieter now. What do we do? Daniel looked at all of us, then said the sentence that changed everything. That depends on whether the family is willing to restructure responsibility or continue avoiding it. Everyone went quiet, and for the first time that night, all eyes turned to me, not with judgment, not with anger, but with realization, because suddenly they understood something. I wasn't the problem. I was the solution they had taken for granted, and now they didn't know how to fix what they had broken. When the truth about Emily's debt finally came out, I had to make a decision that would either save my family or destroy what was left of it. The room didn't feel like a dining room anymore. It felt like a courtroom after the verdict. Nobody was eating. Nobody was speaking. Even the clock on the wall sounded too loud. All eyes kept drifting to me, like I was suddenly responsible for fixing what everyone else had ignored for years. Daniel stood quietly, still holding the folder. Professional. Detached. Like none of this was personal to him. Dad finally broke the silence. His voice was lower now, different from before, not demanding, tired. So what exactly are you saying? Daniel looked at him calmly. I'm saying the debt needs a structured repayment plan. Otherwise, penalties will continue to increase. Dad nodded slowly, then turned toward me. And that's when I knew it was coming again. The shift. Back to me. Always back to me. Can you help? He asked. Not shouted, not pressured, just asked. But somehow it still carried the same weight as before. Every head turned toward me again, waiting. Mom's eyes were red. Emily looked broken. But I had seen that look before. The save me look, the same one I had responded to for years. I took a slow breath. I want to understand something first. Dad frowned slightly. What? I looked around the table. At what point did this become my responsibility alone? Silence. I continued. Because I didn't take those loans. No one responded. I didn't make those purchases. Still nothing. I didn't lie about my income. My voice stayed steady. But inside, everything was tight. Then I looked at Emily. You did. Her eyes dropped. That moment mattered. Because it wasn't an attack. It was reality. And reality had finally entered the room. Daniel spoke quietly. He's correct. Responsibility is distributed. Dad rubbed his forehead. This is still family. I nodded. I agree. A pause. Then I added, but family also tells the truth. That hit differently. The room shifted again. Dad exhaled slowly. So what are you saying? This was it. The moment. The crossroads. I felt everyone holding their breath. I'm saying I can't just erase this. Emily immediately shook her head. So you're just going to walk away? Her voice cracked again. But this time I didn't react emotionally, because I finally understood something important. Helping someone is not the same as rescuing them from consequences forever. I'm not walking away, I said carefully. I'm just not going to be the only plan anymore. Silence. That sentence landed harder than anything else I had said. Not no, not yes. Something in between. Boundaries. Real ones. Dad looked confused. What does that even mean? I looked at Daniel, then back at the family. It means I'm willing to help, but only if everything is transparent from now on. Emily frowned. Transparent? Yes, I continued. No more hidden debts, no more surprises, no more emergencies without explanation. Mom whispered. So you'll help? I paused, then nodded slightly. Yes, but not blindly anymore. A shift happened in the room. For the first time, I wasn't the ATM. I wasn't the villain. I wasn't the savior. I was someone setting conditions. Daniel closed the folder a little more. That is actually the beginning of a viable solution. Dad leaned back in his chair, like he was processing everything at once. But Emily didn't look relieved. She looked uncomfortable. Because for the first time, help wasn't unconditional. It had structure, limits, truth. Then I said the final part. I also need one thing from all of you. Dad looked up. What? I held his gaze. No more rewriting my role in this family. The room went silent again, because everyone knew exactly what I meant. No more calling me selfish for refusing. No more acting like my help never happened. No more turning me into the villain when I set boundaries. Emily wiped her eyes. But we're still family. I nodded. Yes. Then I added quietly, now act like it. A long silence followed, not angry, not defensive, just heavy, like everyone was finally seeing the full weight of what had been happening for years. Daniel glanced at his watch. I'll leave the documents here. You can decide how to proceed. He placed the folder on the table, then walked out. And the moment the door closed, everything changed again. Because now it wasn't about exposure. It was about decisions. And every decision had consequences. Dad looked at me for a long time, then finally said something I didn't expect. You were right about a lot of things. It wasn't perfect, but it was the first real acknowledgement I had ever heard from him, and it didn't fix everything. But it changed the direction. Slowly, uncomfortably, realistically. I thought the worst was over. But the next morning, I woke up to a message that proved the family still hadn't accepted my boundaries. And this time, they had made a new plan without me. I didn't sleep much that night. Even after I got home, my mind kept replaying everything. The group chat, the dinner, Daniel's folder on the table, and Dad's voice saying, "You were right." That part stuck the most. Not because it fixed anything, but because it didn't. It was just the beginning of something messy, something uncertain. I woke up around 9 a.m. My phone was already buzzing. One message, then another, then several more, all from the family group chat. I hesitated before opening it. Something about the tone already felt different. Worse, when I finally checked, my stomach dropped. Dad had posted again, but this time it wasn't an accusation. It was an announcement. We will handle Emily's financial situation internally as a family. No outside involvement needed. I frowned. Internally. Family solution. That sounded like control dressed up as unity. Then Emily added, I don't want strangers involved in my life anymore. Strangers? I almost laughed. Yesterday, Daniel was the only reason the truth came out. But now he was a stranger. And I was being slowly removed from the solution again. Message after message followed. Aunts agreeing, uncles supporting, cousins reacting with hearts and sympathy emojis. The narrative was shifting again, quietly, carefully, like they were trying to rebuild the old version of the story, the one where everything depended on me, but now with more control over how it looked. Then my phone rang. Dad, I answered. What is this? I asked immediately. His tone was calm. Too calm. We've discussed it. We can manage this ourselves. I sat on the edge of my bed. You mean I'm not involved? A pause. You're involved, just not necessary for everything. That sentence. Not necessary. After years of being necessary. After years of being the only one who stepped in. Now suddenly I was optional. Or worse. Replaceable. I stood up. Dad, you literally admitted yesterday. He interrupted. We're handling it. No anger. No debate. Just finality. I could hear something in his voice. Not hostility. Fear. Fear of exposure. Fear of accountability. Fear of losing control of the story again. Then I got a separate message. From Emily. Not in the group. Private. I opened it. I know you think you were helping, but this is humiliating for me. Please stop pushing this. I stared at the screen for a long time. Not because I didn't understand it. Because I did. To her, the issue wasn't the debt, or the decisions, or the years of hidden spending. The issue was visibility, being seen, being exposed, I replied after a moment. I didn't expose you, the debt did. No response. Minutes passed. Then another message came from Dad. We are asking you to respect the family's decision. Respect. Interesting word, because respect had never been part of the equation when I was paying, only when I stopped. I walked to the window. Outside, life looked normal. People going to work, cars moving, everything continuing as if nothing dramatic had happened. But inside this family, something was breaking and rebuilding at the same time, and I finally understood something important. They weren't rejecting me. They were trying to reset the system, back to the old version, where I gave and they received. No questions, no conditions, no truth in the way. I put my phone down, but it buzzed again almost immediately. Another message, this time from Jake. They're planning something tonight. Don't agree to anything before you hear it. I stared at that message for a long time, because whatever plan meant, I already knew one thing. This wasn't over. Not even close. That night, I walked into a second family meeting, but this time, I wasn't the only one who came prepared with a secret. I almost didn't go. After Jake's message, everything in me said to stay away. But curiosity is dangerous, especially when you already know people are planning something behind your back. So I showed up. Same house, same driveway. But this time, something felt off from the moment I parked. No lights on the porch, no visible movement inside. Quiet. Too quiet. I knocked once. Then the door opened. Jake stood there. He didn't smile. Just stepped aside. They're already inside, he said. I walked in, and immediately felt it. This wasn't the same setup as before. The dining table wasn't set for dinner. No food, no casual atmosphere. Instead, everyone was sitting in the living room, in a circle, like an intervention. Dad was at the center again. But this time, he wasn't alone. Mom was beside him, Emily on the other side, and a few relatives I hadn't seen since childhood, all waiting, again. Dad spoke first. We need to finalize a solution. Not discuss, not talk. Finalize. I sat down slowly. And what solution is that? I asked. Dad looked at me carefully. We consolidate everything into one plan, one repayment structure, and we move forward as a family. I nodded slowly. And who pays for it? A pause. Then Emily spoke quickly. Everyone contributes. That caught my attention. Everyone? I repeated. She nodded. Yes, not just you. For the first time in this entire situation, that sounded new. Different, Dad continued. We all share responsibility now. I studied their faces, trying to understand, because something about it felt rehearsed, not emotional, strategic, like they had practiced this version of the story. Then Mom spoke softly. We just want peace in this house. Peace. Another word that usually meant silence, not resolution. I leaned back slightly. And what about transparency? I asked. Dad responded immediately. Of course, we'll manage it together. But something in his tone felt selective, like transparency meant what we choose to share, not everything. Then Jake finally spoke. From the corner of the room. I think he should see the documents first. Dad turned sharply. What documents? Jake looked at me, then back at the family. The ones you didn't show him yesterday. The room shifted instantly.
Emily's face tightened. Mom looked confused. Dad went silent, and I felt it again. That same feeling from before. Something hidden, something unfinished. Dad exhaled slowly. That's not necessary. But Jake stepped forward. It is. Then he looked at me and said the sentence that changed everything. They already transferred some of the debt into your name. I froze. What? The room erupted instantly. Emily stood up. That's not how it sounds. Mom gasped. Dad shouted, Enough! But I wasn't hearing them anymore. My mind locked onto one thing. Transferred. Into my name. I turned to Dad slowly. What did you do? Silence. That silence told me everything before anyone spoke. Then Dad finally said it. We were trying to protect the family from legal escalation. Protect. That word again. Always used to cover something sharp. Something hidden. I stood up. You used my name without telling me. Dad raised his voice slightly. We were going to explain it. When? No answer. Emily stepped forward. It was temporary. Stop, I said sharply. My voice cut through the room. Everyone froze, because this time I wasn't confused. I wasn't emotional. I was clear. And clarity is dangerous in rooms built on excuses. I looked around. Every face, every excuse, every half-truth. And I finally understood the full picture. This wasn't just financial irresponsibility. It was manipulation dressed as family unity. I took a step back. No more. Dad frowned. What do you mean? I looked him directly in the eyes. I mean, I'm done being the backup plan for decisions I didn't make. Silence. Jake nodded slightly from the side. Mom looked like she wanted to speak but didn't. Emily looked scared now. Not of me, but of consequences. Because for the first time, they didn't control the narrative. I did. I turned toward the door. Dad called after me. Don't walk away from your family. I stopped, slowly turned back. and said the final line that stayed in the room long after I left. I didn't walk away from my family. I paused. You stopped treating me like one. Then I left, and nobody followed. But the next morning, I received a legal notice. And for the first time, I realized the family conflict had officially left the house and entered the real world. The envelope was plain. No return emotion, no family tone, no warning, just official. I knew something was wrong the second I saw it in my mailbox. I opened it inside my apartment, slowly, carefully, like the paper itself might change my life. And it did. Legal notice. My eyes scanned the first paragraph, then stopped. Read it again. My name was in it. Not as a witness, not as a contact, as a responsible party. I leaned back in my chair. For a few seconds I didn't move, didn't breathe properly, because this wasn't family anymore. This was documentation, real-world consequences. The notice explained that due to recent financial restructuring attempts within the family accounts,
my name had been linked to certain obligations, temporary authorization, shared liability, administrative inclusion. All the words sounded soft, but the meaning wasn't. I had been pulled into something I never agreed to. My phone started ringing immediately. Dad, I didn't answer it first. Then it stopped. Then started again. I finally picked up. What is this? I asked. Dad didn't sound angry this time. He sounded stressed. It's just a precaution. A precaution, that word again. Always used when something already went wrong. You used my name without permission, I said slowly. A pause. We were trying to prevent legal escalation. I laughed once. Not because it was funny. Because it was unbelievable. You prevented escalation by escalating it. Silence. Then he said something quieter. We didn't think it would go this far. That was the problem. Nobody ever thought it would go this far. Until it did. I stood up and walked to the window. Outside life was normal again. But mine wasn't. This is fraud, I said calmly. Another long silence. Then Emily came on the line. Her voice shaky. Please, don't make this bigger than it is. I closed my eyes. Bigger? You're talking about my name being used on legal documents without consent. She hesitated. It was to help the situation. Help! Everything was help. Even things that broke trust. Even things that crossed lines. Even things that couldn't be undone. Then Jake called in on the same line. He had joined the call. I didn't even ask how. Listen, he said quickly. They panicked. The bank was pushing them. They thought adding your name would stabilize things temporarily. Temporarily. That word again. The family's favorite illusion. I took a deep breath. So what now? I asked. Nobody answered immediately. Then Dad spoke again. We fix it together. Together. I almost smiled. Because together had never been offered when I was paying, only when I was trapped. I'm not fixing something I didn't break, I said firmly. Silence again. This time heavier, more final. Then I said the thing I never thought I would say to my own family. From this point forward, I'm getting legal representation. The reaction was immediate. Mom gasped in the background. Emily said, You wouldn't do that! Dad's voice sharpened slightly. You're really going to take this against your own family? I didn't hesitate. You did that first. That line ended the conversation. Not because anyone agreed, but because there was nothing left to say. I ended the call and sat in silence for a long time. Not angry anymore, not confused, just aware, because the truth had fully shifted now. This wasn't about money. It wasn't even about Emily anymore. It was about consequences, systems, choices. And the moment someone finally stops absorbing damage for everyone else. The knock came the next day. But it wasn't family this time. It was a lawyer. And for the first time, I realized this story wasn't ending. It was entering a new phase. Months later, when everything was finally settled, I received one last letter from Dad. And what he wrote changed how I saw the entire story forever.